Hi, I don't usually make drama-esque videos, but I felt I needed to make this one. For anyone who's waiting for my next Splixio video at all, I will continue that next week, don't worry. I know you have the title, but I need to clarify it. I will be discussing flawed analyses, problematic advice, and giving some benefit of the doubt to these Simpson episodes, giving some ideas of what they might have been intending when making these. I want to make it clear that I harbor no ill will to anyone in production of the PhantomStrider video or the Simpsons episodes. I simply believe a lack of perspective has made this video flawed and problematic. A real quick disclaimer, I have not seen most of these episodes, so I can't give my own analysis on them.
Part of what I think has made the show special since 1989 is it's been willing to take a stand on things that matter to it. Sometimes I consider their messages stupid or heavily misinformed. In fact, there was one specific episode that made me create this video. Let's talk about the Crayon in the Brain episode, aka Homer. I think this episode has one of the worst moral messages you could give to anyone. If you're unique and intelligent, just give it up. In the episode, Homer's lack of intelligence is seen as a blissful state to be, and the second he gains intelligence, he somehow becomes miserable. In Homer, we learn that apparently the cause of Homer's stupidity is due to a crayon lodged in his brain. As Homer discovers his newfound intelligence, he finds himself not fitting in. With his IQ increased to 105, suddenly stupid movies aren't as funny. And then Lisa shows him probably the stupidest bar graph in the series, where with intelligence going up, happiness goes down. My point is that the lesson of this episode is completely broken, incorrect, and Homer's conclusion is that somehow he should do permanent damage to his brain in order to fit in society again.
Not much to be said about this one. It is spot on when it comes to the problem of the episode. I think it's wild that Homer is acting as an intellectual at an IQ of 105 when the average IQ is 100. So if Homer's acting intellectually at an average IQ, it really says something about everyone else in the town of Springfield, since it implies the average person in the Simpsons universe is an intellectual. Just a fun little thought, since I won't be talking about the analysis very much. My benefit for the doubt of this episode is maybe the writers were going for something similar to not acting superior to people and how it's lonely on top. But obviously this message would have been clearly mishandled.
And now, let's talk about Homer's night out. Now don't get me wrong, I think the intended message was, don't objectify people, and that's always a good moral. But instead, in execution, well, it ended up the weirdest message of them all. My wife Nin and I rewatched this episode together last night, and both of us found ourselves scratching our heads. So we are talking about an episode made in 1989. And society has changed a lot in those 36 years. In case you forgot, or maybe never saw season 1, Homer goes out to a bachelor party with a bunch of his work friends. At this party, there's an exotic dancer who, gasp, Homer dances next to. And oh no, Marge is absolutely furious for some reason. Why? I was confused, so I turned to my wife and asked her, do you understand why she's mad, honey?
No. This episode is stupid. If I found Josh dancing with another woman, I'd be clapping him.
I get in the 80s that the Western world was less liberated on sensuality and open expression, but this is just ridiculous.
I think if someone has a problem with their partner dancing with someone else, the problem is more likely with them. That's just too insecure.
This analysis is really the reason I said in the intro that this video is problematic and flawed due to a lack of perspective. There are actually many people who would not want their partner dancing next to a woman who is hired to dance to evoke sexual feelings. There are many who wouldn't want them dancing with someone else to begin with. This is not due to a lack of insecurity. These are respectful boundaries that many people have. Some people have more open relationships, yes, even if it is just slightly more. Not wanting your spouse to dance next to an exotic dancer is not a wild preference. When my little brother was watching this out in the living room, my sister, who is married and pregnant, walked out of the room saying, I can't listen to any more of this crap. I'm telling you this to make it clear that it's not just a me thing, it is a thing. Some people have a more open or closed relationship than their partner, which it needs to be discussed in order to maintain a healthy relationship. I'm afraid that this portrayal of not wanting your partner to dance with someone else being due to a lack of insecurity will cause some people to think that they're being too controlling in their boundaries and not discuss their proper boundaries and just let themselves be uncomfortable with how their relationship is. It's especially worse if this someone else is someone paid to induce sexual feelings, even if in a minor way. This video also implies that sex work is very accepted to the point that it also implies that it shouldn't have to be discussed whether it's okay or not. Once again, there are very many different views on this topic. Some people are more okay with sex outside of marriage, prostitutes, exotic dancers, pornography, etc. Some people are less content with them. It's also not uncommon for one person to be content with one thing but not the other. The best point that PhantomStrider made about this episode wasn't even in this video. In another video about the Simpsons' worst episodes, he mentions that Marge gets mad at him for this than anything else, despite some of his blunders being able to be considered catastrophic. This is fair, but I do believe that another episode explains this. In the episode where Homer helps a woman start up her music career called Colonel Homer, the woman starts to fall in love with Homer and starts to become more open about it. Or at least giving more hints. Marge is also extremely mad in this situation, more so than she has been in other situations. Thankfully, she does recognize that it's not Homer initiating it, so he doesn't get anything that he doesn't deserve. Back on point, Marge tends to get more enraged when it has to do something with her and Homer's relationship. It's also clear that she's more passionate about society not objectifying women. I believe this episode does a good job at humanifying the exotic dancer and not portraying her as a victim or evil or basically enslaved. Whether sexualizing yourself for others is a good thing or not, she chose this life and she's still human. I have no benefit of the doubt for this episode because I do not believe this is a bad episode.
Let's talk about Homer the Heretic. When I asked Lydia for suggestions for this list, this episode was her main suggestion. She said that in the episode, Marge tells Homer that if he doesn't go to church, she will tell the kids that he is evil.
They'll have to tell them their father is, well, wicked.
The first problem that appears is PhantomStrider says that Marge says if Homer doesn't go to church, she'll have to tell the children that he's evil. But when it shows a clip, she uses the word wicked instead. The two words are similar, but they're not the same. The difference is mostly level. Imagine someone with an alcohol problem who sleeps around, smokes, gambles, swears, lies, etc. That person could be considered wicked, but that doesn't mean they're evil. Unless they have a partner and they're still sleeping around, I personally would consider that evil. This hypothetical person could still have good intentions and do some good things too. Saying Marge will have to tell the children that he's evil is an exaggeration.
When I was a kid watching Homer the Heretic, the line that I personally remembered most was when Marge said to Homer she's never going to choose him over her faith.
Homer, please don't make me choose between my man and my God, because you just can't win.
This is where things get a little confusing. I had to do some searching to find that clip, and Marge just kind of says that line. It's not really clear what the consequence of that choice will be, it just seems to be a general statement. Unless that statement is used for guilt tripping, power tripping, or some other unchrist-like tripping, it is a good thing. No one should be forced to change themselves to keep the one they love. Because in cases where their loved one is requiring them to change to be or stay together, they either don't truly love them or it just simply won't work out anyway. In this case, Marge simply seems to be distressed about the situation and wants to make sure Homer doesn't require her to make any hard choices. Thankfully for Marge, Homer doesn't seem to be doing this. It's still a bit confusing, but that's my guess on what's going on.
It reminded me of the Bible's Genesis 22, when Abraham is willing to sacrifice his son Isaac to his God. When I read it as a kid, it was one of the chapters where my kid brain just said, that isn't right. Personally, I'd kill a god to save my family.
The story of Abraham and Isaac is a bit harsh on their service, but there's a few things you need to remember. 1, God was never actually going to have Abraham sacrifice Isaac. 2, God knows the best that death is not the end and that mortal life is just a small speck of time. And 3, Abraham would have been one of the most familiar with God's plan out of everyone in history. There's a reason God specifically blessed Abraham with all the blessings that he did. There's a reason that he's sometimes referred to as the God of Abraham. I'm sure Abraham knew about Jesus Christ, his life and death, his resurrection, and that he would see Isaac again in the post-mortal world for the rest of eternity. Even still, I'm also sure that Abraham was hesitant. He would have been asking questions like, why would God give me a child through a miracle only to require that I take him away? Did God not bless me with much prosperity? If Isaac must die, why must it be by my hand? If you look at it through Abraham's eyes, he most likely felt that Isaac wouldn't truly die. He didn't know what would happen for sure, of course, but he would have also been in situations before where God told him to do something and everything turned out fine when he did. This would have just been the biggest trust fall that God put him through. Why did God put him through it? 1, to test his faith. God promises rewards for sticking through our trials. 2, it was a symbol of God sacrificing his own son, Jesus Christ, for all of us so that we may be cleansed of our sin, resurrected, and exalted. From an outside perspective, it may seem a bit barbaric, but to Abraham, he knew that God had never steered him wrong before, and that God would somehow turn it into a good thing, as he did. Also, you cannot kill a god. Yes, I know, Jesus died, but he really wasn't in his godhood form. He was more like a literal demigod. Pretty sure if he was in his godhood form, everyone who saw him would be dead due to sheer power.
Honestly, I don't hate the episode in general, as I think they try to give a bit of Homer's perspective too. Like when Homer says,
"And what if we pick the wrong religion? Every week we're just making God madder and madder."
I don't really have much to say about the rest of the analysis, and it basically gives the benefit of the doubt for me. That being that it also gives Homer's perspective, so it's more like a discussion, which is always good to have. Though I do want to say something about Homer's line of, what if we pick the wrong religion? Search, ponder, and pray. If you genuinely search for truth, God will point you to it. It would defeat the point of a religion if he didn't.
our next choice of terrible moral lessons is Codependence Day. The moral message of this episode is concerning, to say the least. But the episode is self-aware at the time that Marge and Homer are in an unhealthy relationship. But the end message seems to be codependence can hold a marriage together, which I don't think is a hot take for me to say that's a really bad message. Homer and Marge start drinking together. Marge has a good time, but eventually she gets too wasted and Homer frames her for a DUI. After she's put in rehab, Marge discovers this, but decides it doesn't matter because she likes spending time with Homer. While it is wonderful when we can love a person, complete codependence is very unhealthy in a relationship. And I think keeping that little space and independence is very important.
Being on your own is not a bad thing, especially when you don't have a respectful relationship where things are equal and loving.
My concern for this analysis is similar to a comment made about the episode that is the reason that PhantomStrider made this video. For those who haven't seen this video, we'll get to it later. I actually had to look up what codependence was. For those who don't know, as I didn't, codependence is, according to Psychology Today, a dysfunctional relationship dynamic in which one person assumes the role of the giver, sacrificing their own needs and well-being for the sake of the other, the taker. I will have a link for that down below if you want to read more about it. My problem with this analysis is that it doesn't really define codependence, and it's not a common thing to know about. As a result, it's very easy to mix up with being clingy. Being clingy isn't necessarily a bad thing as long as it's within reasonable limits. I'm afraid that someone will make this misinterpretation, be afraid that their will to be with their partner more often is unhealthy, and try to distance themselves from them. As someone who is a bit clingy myself, although some might not know it, I felt as I was being told that my clinginess is unhealthy. I want to make it clear that it's okay to want to be around your partner most of the time, as long as it has a healthy regulation.
If you don't feel comfortable alone, you should get a pet, like a cat.
Hey Ariel, you wanna talk about my favorite stuff and stuff like that? You wanna, I don't know, go see a movie or something? Like, I don't know, get out of the house, I don't know. Don't stare at me like that. Movies are great, you should go see a movie theater, it's great. Do you want to see my YouTube videos? Do you want to see them? They're nice. I think so, at least. My shorts are funny. You want to play D&D together? You want to play D&D together? I think you'd like it.
I'm sorry if that's a little too sarcastic, but I think it gets my point across. I want to be honest and say if someone gave me this advice when I was talking to them about my problems of feeling lonely, I would feel hurt and like they didn't really truly care. Yes, cats and other pets can fill some social need, but not on the same level as other humans. It doesn't really solve anything, it just makes it slightly more bearable. I love cats, but they do not stop the feelings of loneliness. Overall, I don't have much to go on for the benefit of the doubt for this episode, since the analysis didn't really go much into what happened or what was said. So my benefit of the doubt for this episode will be that the writers had as little information as I did when I saw this PhantomStrider video.
Our next Simpsons episode is Todd, why hast thou forsaken me? In the episode, Ned Flanders kicks his son Todd out of the house because he stopped believing in the Christian God. Why did he stop believing in his God? Well, his mother Maud is dead. There's actually things I do like about this episode, in that it paints Todd as a real person. In this episode, he's thinking about what he's been taught here, and if it stands up to scrutiny in the world he lives in. But something I really don't like about this episode is that Lisa grossly misrepresents Buddhism by pushing her belief on Todd and trying to quote-unquote convert him.
You get reincarnated as a human, or an animal, or a ghost? Buddha's no god, and neither is God. Don't worry, I'll get him.
In the story of Buddha, Siddhartha didn't ever force his beliefs. Buddhism is a personal journey, and Buddha admits to this. The guy basically says to his followers, this is something you can choose to follow if you would like to. I think it leads to mental peace, but you decide. He doesn't demand people follow him under threat. Did the writers even look at a Wikipedia article for Buddhism before writing this? The whole freaking point of Buddhism is about the personal journey. Buddhists believe that nirvana is reached by breaking their believed cycle of death and birth, not by strong-arming people into beliefs.
I read the Wikipedia for Buddhism for this video, and I have to say, it's not easy to find Buddha's views on conversion. I don't know how hard Lisa was trying to convert Todd throughout the episode, so I don't know if she was strong-arming him or not. What I was able to find in the Wikipedia article says, Buddhist texts assert that rebirth can occur in 6 realms of existence, namely 3 good realms, heavenly, demigod, human, and 3 evil realms, animal, hungry ghosts, hellish. Samsara ends if a person attains nirvana, the blowing out of the afflictions through insight into impermanence and non-self. The link to this article will also be in the description. Basically, what I'm getting is that it's similar to Christianity in the way that you can choose what you do with your life, but I highly recommend this because the alternatives are either not as good or not good in general. This is especially true for my denomination, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly referred to as Mormons. We believe that it's a little more complicated than heaven and hell. First, after you immediately die, there's spiritual prison and there's spiritual paradise, both of which are temporary until after resurrection. Next is the resurrection, then final judgment, and then you go one of 4 places: the celestial kingdom, the terrestrial kingdom, the telestial kingdom, or outer darkness. Barely anyone will go to outer darkness, and the other 3 places are already better than Earth, just for a little more context. A little off topic, but the point is, it's not too different in a way. The biggest difference is that you'll just have to try again in Buddhism. Maybe I just don't understand Buddhism enough. Of course, some denominations of Christianity are a bit more stricter on who goes to heaven, but I can't really speak for them. And I wasn't referring to those who try to force people to be Christian, or any other religion.
What is the moral message here? Well, the problem happens after Ned suddenly dies. Todd decides to try praying, and magically, Ned just comes back to life. Obviously, I'm glad that Ned came back, but to me, this is a confusing, kinda bad message. From my understanding, the episode is saying by believing and praying, Ned came back to life. So why didn't that praying work when Todd's mother died? See, this is the problem. It's a slippery slope. Are they saying Todd just didn't pray hard enough? Is the message saying that Maud not resurrecting is Todd's fault? If Todd prayed hard enough, could he stop the 7,050 children dying in South Africa every day? Could he save the woman or girl killed every 10 minutes by their intimate partner or other family member? Stats from Human Sciences Research Council.
The message, if I'm correct, is that sometimes the answer to your prayers is yes, and sometimes it is no. God doesn't always interfere with everything in life, otherwise it would take away our agency. It's not impossible that Todd's mother was needed in heaven, or that Todd needed to experience not having a mother so we could help others in that situation. As I mentioned earlier, God doesn't see death the same way we do, as he knows the best that it's only a small speck of time in comparison to what waits us afterwards. It also seems from the visit passes that God didn't intend for them to stay dead. Although they did appear to have them off for a little bit. I haven't seen the episode, so I don't know for sure. But anyway, if Todd didn't pray, I'm sure his brother was. That way, Ned could have still returned in answer to someone's prayers, and Todd could have learned this lesson if he chose to.
Are they saying if Todd had chosen to remain an atheist, his dad would have died? That seems a little insulting to atheists there, and so many other religions. I'd love to hear your interpretation of this message, but to me, this message is really messed up. The episode also paints atheism as a sad, miserable state, but I cannot stress enough what an insult that is to myself and many other atheists I know.
Believe it or not, I understand how PhantomStrider feels. There are some Christians who don't count my denomination as a Christian church, and even some who believe that all Christians go to heaven, but the members of my church will go to hell. I know there's an episode where Homer becomes an assassin and kills famous people so companies can use their image, and when those people come back to kill Homer, he asks them which church is true. I don't remember the answer, but I do know that in the Simpson universe, Joseph Smith Jr. probably wouldn't be considered a prophet. Could they make it so that he got off easy? Sure. Maybe all religious leaders of all religions and denominations will go to heaven if they actually believed what they taught. Even still, I can't expect the Simpsons to cater to my beliefs. They believe what they believe, and they will teach it. I don't have to believe that what they teach is accurate or true, but in the end I just have to try to understand them and where they're coming from. The portrayal that atheism is a sad state may result in trying to portray Todd as being sad and confused due to not knowing what he believes. I hope Ned learned in this episode to accept that if his children's faith differs from his, even if Todd did return to God. My benefit of the doubt for this episode is that if Lisa was trying to strong-arm Todd into Buddhism, then maybe it was supposed to be ironic in a way, if that makes sense. None of the representations of religion are 100% accurate anyway.
And our final choice is from Season 20. The good, the sad, and the drugly. Welcome to the reason I made this video. Lisa feels upset about the current world situation. Perfectly understandable. So the adults around her treat this as quote-unquote depression.
And we have a new drug to combat this syndrome. Ignore it all.
A real psychologist puts thought and assessment into diagnosing a person's depression. And it takes a psychiatrist, a medical doctor who was also trained in psychology, to even prescribe medication at all. Then the episode treats antidepressants like something that makes people hallucinate the world as perfect. I have no doubt this episode contributed to the widespread myth that medication is a quote-unquote easy fix. According to Brown Health University and the AFSP, 132 Americans die per day of self-harm. On that first airing, this was watched by 6.5 million Americans. It's safe to say many more people have watched this episode to this day, and The Simpsons told every single one of them they were ignoring their problems by taking antidepressants. Why the ominous music when Lisa goes to a therapist? According to Dr. Sarani, a psychology professor at Adelphi University,
Antidepressants are not quote-unquote happy pills. Unlike drugs like amphetamines, they don't induce euphoria. They simply reduce the symptoms of depression. The goal is simply to improve your well-being.
I could only find one comment from a person on a YouTube clip of the episode who actually pointed out how incredibly damaging this episode was.
So this is the comment I mentioned earlier in the video. For those who didn't catch it, it says, I came back to this episode because it really impacted me as a child. I resisted getting life-saving medication for years because of misinformation like this I saw as a child. I love The Simpsons, but this episode was really damaging. By LMC3CS. Thankfully, the analysis for this episode is done well. When you're right, you're right. If there was somehow a lack of perspective in this, it does take up about a third of the video, and that would be really difficult for me to cover it all.
Dr. Sarani discussed this myth too.
Antidepressants cannot change who you are. Your personality always remains intact. Medications ease depressive symptoms. This can improve your thinking, judgment, and reasoning. This can make it more productive for you to problem solve and address life issues.
The gist of Lisa's final moral is, you can't run away from your problems, see things as they are. Lisa taking antidepressants when anxiety is crippling her to the point of her seeing everything as pointless is called facing her problems. Lisa going medication-free when she's too miserable to do anything is far more running from her problems.
My benefit of the doubt for this episode is best said by a comment on this PhantomStrider video by Sinja, which says, I think the episode with Lisa being put on antidepressants isn't about depressed people being medicated properly, but about disruptive and difficult children who exhibit opinions or viewpoints that are seen as undesirable being medicated into catatonia to be more manageable to adults, which is a thing that absolutely happens and something I have personally experienced. I don't think Lisa was meant to be portrayed as actually being depressed. It's a fair thought, but it's also clear that if that's what the writers were going for, they fumbled it pretty badly. If you want to see this PhantomStrider video for yourself, you can, and you can make your own opinions about it. If PhantomStrider somehow sees this, I want to clarify again that I harbor no ill will towards you, or anyone in your production. I just believe that some of the things said in your video needed to be clarified, corrected, or just in general discussed. Overall, I do think half of these analyses were spot on, except the codependent stay one was dangerously misleading with the information left out. Thank you for watching this video. I hope it reached those who needed to see it, and I guess I'll just see you later.